Hi, everybody. It's Nico Bernie Miller, the CEO of Change 3. And today is our last Growing Happily series for 2025. Today, we're talking about a really good topic. How do you actually host webinars that drive high attendance and good engagement? You might be thinking, maybe I've been doing this webinar thing, or I did one or two webinars and I had people register, or maybe I only had a few registrations and I didn't have great attendance. You might be scratching your head going, well, how do I improve that? Well, join me today. We're going to have a nice high impact session to talk right about it on Growing Happily. Thank you so much for joining me today. This is the last session for this year. We have got such a program planned for 2026. So I hope you're going to keep joining us, keep growing, and keep being happy. Today's session talking about what do you do to actually make sure that you've got growing attendance and high engagement for your webinars. We're going to get into it. A lot of folks are doing webinars, and maybe you're jumping in, maybe you've already been doing them. And you're thinking, well, if webinars are so effective, how come my attendance isn't what I'd like it to be? So first of all, let's look at some data because I'm a data-oriented type of person. And in today's discussion, it's me, and I'm going to show you some numbers, baby, so you can make those numbers sing. So first thing is up. If you were to go and do a Google search of our webinars still effective in 2025. So we did a little Google search. You got the nice little AI overview, sorry. And you'll see there's a ton of sponsored results because there's a lot of companies like On24 and Zoom and you name it that have a webinar solution out there. And there's loads of companies that are talking about webinars because yes, webinars are still highly effective in 2025. And they're going to keep being effective in 2026, especially if you're targeting business people. Webinars are awesome. There's a great connection between webinars and demand generation. The webinar is a really strong signal when people attend. If they register, did they watch the replay? There's a loads of things that you can use a webinar for from a lead generation perspective and a content marketing perspective. But then you might be asking the question of, okay, I get all that, Nico, but how come my webinar attendance is dropping? Well, you're not the only one, dear. Webinar attendance is dropping in general across the board, across industry, across segments, because everybody's doing webinars. That's not a reason for you to stop. It's not a reason for you to jump in casually. It's just a reality that we're in. So for the next 30 minutes, I'm going to talk to you about what I've learned. I would love your questions. I would love you to challenge me and say, no, I don't agree with you, because there's no one size fits all. There's no one right answer. For each brand, it's a unique conversation. And I'm going to share with you what I learned. And I'm asking you for your input and your insight, and hopefully together we'll grow happily. So, what are some things that actually improve webinar attendance and engagement? The first one is really important, and that's regularity. So gone are the days like 5, 6, 7 years ago when webinars were sort of fresh and clean and rare, that you can be like, oh, I'm gonna do a webinar on, rack mounted chassis based server solutions, and you get 500 people show up because they're curious to learn about it. Gone are the days that you can have an AI themed webinar and get 600 people, because we've done that, right? We've had 800 people, for some of our, leading edge topics sign up. But the thing is leading edge is exactly that. So maybe you're, really awesome and you get out in front and you get a really big webinar. But unless you want to jump from big, rare topic to big, rare topic, and you're really trying to have regular conversations around regular topics, storage, security, marketing, sales, lead gen, whatever it is, there's lots of competition. And there's lots of great, intelligent brands out there that are putting out great, interesting webinars. And so one webinar in a sea of many will, probably struggle to get a lot of attention. Of course, you can address that with things like incentives. Oh, I give a gift. You get this if you attend. You get this if you, do a demo or something. There's lots of ideas and tactics that work, and some work better than others. You can certainly use paid media to promote your event to your target audience and try and get in front of more people so you'll get more registrations, and more registrations mean more attendance. But all those things take resources and time. And that's the first thing, is regularity. It's I would recommend a commitment. And from my experience and my journey with hosting webinars for my clients, using webinars as a regular component of our lead generation strategy for our business and for our clients' businesses, what we've learned is the more that it's a program, the easier it becomes, the better that we're able to create different kinds of content experiences, and the more that we're able to invest in creating it into a platform. Another big thing is to think about yourself a little bit differently than you might have done back in the day, when webinars, you could do one webinar, maybe two, and generate, 20 or 30 or 40, quality, marketing qualified leads. Um, I would say think of yourself as a content producer. Not you, if you're producing a webinar, it's probably not that much different than producing a live stream. And right now, this webinar is also live streamed on all of our channels, and we stream regularly and we stream consistently. And streaming economics and streaming behavior is a bit different than webinars. And what a lot of trends are happening is a lot of folks are trending towards becoming more like content producers, like live streamers or YouTubers, or, whatever your platform of choice is for that kind of content. Because the world that we live in, right? We're used to consuming content when we feel like it, in whatever environment we feel like, and consuming it in at whatever time we want to consume it. And so, yes, you can choose dates and times for your webinars that will improve attendance, in the afternoon, around lunchtime, early afternoon. Thursdays are good. Folks say Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We find attendance on Wednesdays and Thursdays to be the best. It depends on the time of year. It's a whole algorithm. You can definitely optimize around those things. But what I strongly would encourage you to do is really invest in creating a program and finding a partner. You could get a stream producer like we have, who's amazing. You can partner with a company like us, where we do this all the time to enable you. There's a variety of ways that you can get into producing webinars and being part of a regular program that engages your audience, so that you'll have the highest possible chance for attendance and engagement. All right. So what's number two? So you're like, okay, I get that. Do a program. Don't just do one a year. Okay. Because that's pretty much what I'm saying to you. I wouldn't encourage you to just do one webinar a year and expect to get huge attendance rates. You might. Certainly, there are things you can do to increase registration and attendance. There are things you can offer. There's certain types of content you can present that might be rare or unique, that will definitely engage your audience. But all those things will require investment, right? It's investment of time, investment of dollars, and it's a function of what you've got, what's your budget, what's your time frame, and what you're trying to accomplish. But if you're trying to, get the most for the least amount of cash, dollar investment, and time investment, I would recommend that you create a program. Do a series. I've seen lots of people, take their series of webinars and build on them, turn them into, other kind of content. I just saw a former client take her series of webinars that she did over many years, and they were great. She's amazing. And she just launched it into a live event, which was awesome. So, that sort of stuff is what you've got to think about, is rather than seeing it as a one point in time, think of it as an opportunity to do a program and offer regularity. So number two, what's next? Well, baby, make sure those webinars are useful. So you could be saying that to me. And again, give me your input. I love it. Make sure that they're useful. The way that I try to get signals from my audience and for the audiences of my clients is I do a lot of research. I am a researcher. I love data. So I'm gonna show you a little bit of data. So, for my company, Change 3, we have our own branded surveys. We have our own platform, where we do research on behalf of clients and, collect research about technology, buying behavior, you name it. And so research, research, research. And that's a really great way to get signals from your audience about what they do and don't like. So I'm gonna show you a little bit of research. So if I were to put that on screen and I were to look at, what are the types of tactics that companies currently use, about 40 or so percent of them, I know it's small. I know I'm an old lady and I need these glasses, and y'all might need glasses too, honey. But here on the first graph, if you could see it, about midway down under social media, question number 5 in this survey, we've got about 100 people took this survey. And it's about their sales and marketing tech. So question number 5 asked them, what kind of tactics are they using and what are they interested or planning to use? So virtual events, not top of the list, content marketing, which is blogs, social media, writing white papers, that sort of stuff, real high, very common, followed by event, email marketing, right? Sending out emails that hopefully have useful information, social media, and then virtual events, right? But here's something that I want to throw out there for you guys. It takes some coordination. And it does take, like I said, the help of somebody who's really good at this stuff. Like in my case, I have a stream producer who's amazing. And, we've got a whole production team that I've built up over the years. But virtual events like webinars, like this one, can become pillars in your content marketing strategy. So you could accomplish 2 goals with one motion. I try not to use the kill 2 birds, right? You know what I'm saying, but because I'm trying to be always positive, it's a challenge. But you can accomplish 2 goals with one motion through virtual events. So rather than, it's a mindset change, right? So rather than thinking of your virtual event as, oh, I'm hosting this virtual event and I want to generate 50 leads and I want to get this many people in the room, and right. Yes, of course, you want to accomplish those goals. You may or may not, get 50 people in a room. You might get more, but that virtual event can become the foundation of a whole content program. And so when you produce that content, it can become a very rich experience, not only for those people who are in the room and those people who you promoted to later in a replay. You can live stream it, you can cut it up into teasers, shorts, social media videos, clips, you name it, right? So there's a lot of capability, but a lot of that is not always easy for a marketing team to do on their own. Marketing teams are great with producing content and social media and stuff like that. But video production can sometimes be a skill set that's not innate in your average fantastic marketer. So finding a partner to help you with the production is usually going to be really great. And having those virtual events and making sure that those virtual events are showing some real value added information that you would want to present later. Now you got 2 objectives with one motion. So that's one thing that I really highlight is make sure that what you're presenting is useful, valuable. It's not the opportunity to sell your wares. I mean, that could be worked into it at some point, but you want folks to find it to be useful and valuable. And so make sure you have something good to share. So if I keep going and I look at another study that we do lots of them, and we look at, what's the, this is about lead generation and what's the greatest challenges that we might find with generating leads. Quality and quantity are always the top, challenges. And back to, well, how do they generate leads? It's almost identical. Isn't it great? Another survey, around 100 executives, not the same people. Virtual events are number 4. Email marketing in this one is number 1 of in terms of how lead generation is done. So for today, guys, this whole conversation was, what do you do to actually increase virtual event attendance and engagement? Well, do it regularly. Make sure you've got some value add. Some tips that you might get about, from, myself and other experts out there is, think about things you can do to make them more interactive. We used to do polls. We still do polls, where you ask your audience a poll. For our motion, for our events, we're enhancing them in 2026. I don't want to say reimagining them. We're building on the foundation that we started in 2024. And so in 2026, we're looking to make them, even more production values, incorporate our polls in there in new ways, introduce, we have live streaming now that we've introduced in the second half of the year. And so we're introducing new experiences to drive engagement, not only in the webinar itself, but in other channels. Because ultimately, I would say our goals as leaders and as marketers is to engage our audience. And I would love your opinions. Post it in the chat, send me some email, direct message me on social, wherever you want to. But, I would say that in a lot of cases, our goal is to meet our audience wherever they are. If they're in our webinar, if they're in the live stream, if they're on any number of, social channels, if they're watching the replay or engaging with our content on demand, I think we probably would be happy in all those scenarios, because our goal with producing this content is to present our audience with an opportunity to get to know our brands, something that's useful so that they associate something really good with our brand and an opportunity to engage with us. And if you have a platform like we do, where we have lots of good signals, then we can see, what that activity is. What are they engaging? Who's engaging? What company are they from? All that kind of good stuff. And that's really helpful as part of your lead generation program. All right. So third thing, I said I like to do threes. I always operate in threes, right? So what's the third thing that will help improve event attendance and engagement? So we talk about regularity, value add, and distribution. So I've been talking about that a little bit. The big thing in right now, thanks to our buddies at AI, right? Our AI, agentic AI, this era of AI is hyper personalization. So folks don't always want to do everything on your time. They don't always want to do it when you want to do it. And it's really about creating the most flexibility, the most flexible, far-reaching, personal experience that people can engage on. So they will, be able to choose to engage with their content wherever they are. Social media, later on demand in the middle of the night, while they're traveling on a plane, live, what we're trying to do, and it's a journey for us, just like I'm sure it's a journey for you, is create an experience we call it in the room, when you join the webinar, versus if you're watching us live or if you're watching us on demand. And so for us, what we try to do is we encourage comments, we encourage, folks to interact on all channels. But if you really want that live interaction, if you want an opportunity to potentially talk to, maybe even come on camera and have a discussion with the speaker, then that's really where you want to be in the room, right? You want to join us in the room. If you're really curious about the content and you really want to learn from that perspective, then, watching us live, or watching the replay might be just right for you. And so what we try to do is create a lot of paths to for that user, for you, because that's who we care about, for what you want, is to create a lot of paths to get to that content. And the same is true for you. If we look at the trends in the world, it's hyper personalization, giving people access to that content on demand, giving them access to it in many different platforms, and obviously packaging it up so it's easy for them to absorb in the various form factors that they might absorb it. Shorts versus the full content, clips versus reels, you name it. And so you might be thinking, oh my gosh, this is a whole set of production that I wasn't used to. I could do a webinar, but now you're telling me I need to actually produce a lot of content. You can do whatever you want. I always say, baby, you could do whatever you want. But if you want to flow with the ocean of time of how a lot of this stuff is evolving, then I would strongly encourage you to update your mindset, right? Advance, continue to evolve, and think of yourself as a content producer. Think about how these events are part of your whole content strategy, and that how you can turn these events not only as, live experiences for people in the room with you, but that they can be then transformed into other types of content. And you might have already had that idea, but maybe you're struggling with putting it into production. And so that's really where it's helpful. Maybe you get a little bit of help from a third party like us, or like I said, hire a producer that can help you to put the regular operations in place that can take your webinars that you're already doing and turn them into other form factors that can be optimized and used for your content. It's not as straightforward and easy as it might seem like. It does take some coordination, and it definitely takes some, know-how when it comes to video assets. They are definitely different and require a bit of different skill sets. There are some really cool AI tools that can help you with it, but again, it requires someone that's got a bit of knowledge about the different form factors and assets and specifications. And so it's really helpful to have someone that can do that for you. And so that's it. I'm keeping it short and sweet today because y'all got me by myself. But like I said, what do you do to increase attendance and engagement? Regularity, make sure it's a valuable experience, and distribute it out in as many channels as you can. Lean on, pulling in research, make sure that content is useful for the user, whether it's rare or not. What's important is that it is useful for your audience. And I always say, don't worry about if you got 1 million views or 2 views. Your goal here is to engage the right people. And as long as you're doing that, then you're doing great. So thank you so much for joining me today on Growing Happily. I'm Nico Bernie Miller, the CEO of Change 3, and I can't wait to see you again in 2026. Have a great year. Thank you.